The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Hey, perfect pour. Thank you, Sam. Welcome to The Winemakers, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Sonoma.
It's a Monday morning pour, Sam.
Monday morning pour. A little heavy or not heavy enough?
A little hesitant.
A little hesitant? A little nerves. A little shake the weekend fog.
Those of you that listen to the show know that once in a while you hear a for our personal heroes and legends. And today we actually have one of those people on the show. So there you go. Cathy Corison is joining us today with her daughter Grace, and also Anna Brittain from is it Napa Green or Napa Rise? Because
Napa Green and Rise is our big symposium, which we'll talk more
See,
about.
that's what we were.
Okay.
Isn't that what we said this
I
morning?
kept going back and forth. I wasn't exactly sure how I should be.
Yeah, Rise is our big, crazy climate and wine symposium that Cathy and Grace are going to be keynoting at. So we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, I think it was Phil that I was telling. I was telling him that you were going to be here, and I think I said Napa Rise, and he said, "You mean Napa Green?" And I said, "No, I'm not. Now I'm confused."
I'm just glad we're being talked about.
How are ticket sales going?
Pretty good. You know, the industry is a little bit down. That means everything's a little bit down, but it's going. And this podcast will get us some more folks.
Selling tickets isn't an easy thing to do these days.
Yeah.
It's easier to sell wine somehow. Barely.
It's happening.
Okay, I kind of wanted to. I was glad that Grace showed up today because I wanted to ask her if she would answer I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
And anyone who does any research and you go on Wikipedia, do you know who writes the stuff that's on Wikipedia pages? Isn't it like a community
It's a community, yeah.
Okay.
That's why not all of it's true.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. So I want to, instead of asking your mom, I thought I would ask you whether you thought this stuff was true.
Okay.
All right. So Cathy Corison grew up in Riverside, California. She studied biology at Pomona College and was on their men's diving team.
So far, so good.
Because the school didn't have a women's team. In 1972, she signed up on a whim for an extracurricular wine appreciation class while signing up people for her trampoline class.
Yeah.
This is true?
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for her love of jumping up and down, we may never have had Corison wines.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Trampoline saves Napa.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so this one is the one. Upon moving to Napa, she started working in the tasting room at Sterling Vineyards and at a wine shop. During this time, she was getting her master's degree at the University of California, Davis. She was told by her professor she would not get a job in Napa Valley because she was a woman. Mm-hmm. She tried to get a job at Freemark Abbey and was initially denied the job. Part of the reason the owners gave was because she was too short and they believed she could not work in the wine cellar.
That is correct.
They didn't talk about my stature. It was my gender.
Really? So,
Very clearly.
Yeah.
They would not have a woman in the cellar. And the Napa Valley had never had women hauling hoses before 1978.
Wow.
So, no, it wasn't. Yes, I weighed about 80 pounds, but that wasn't.
And quite short, but
and
not
quite small, but that wasn't the real problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so where did you go after that? What was that first job?
I got to the Napa Valley 50 years ago in a couple months, and it was going nuts. It had started to wake up in the mid-'60s with Don Chappellet and Robert Mondavi's wineries, and by the time I got here in 75, it was going nuts. And so there were so many opportunities for all of us as we got out of school with degrees in enology, regardless of stature or gender.
So who was in your class?
We were a relatively big class. There were 8 master students. John Conscard was one of them. George Bursick, Tom Peterson, Margie Grote, who founded ETS Labs,
Right.
was in the class.
These all
There's an inside baseball thing on ETS Labs.
yeah, exactly.
If you know, you know.
Yeah. You know how
So I'm
important.
sure I'm missing somebody, but
Yeah.
it was
We'll just try to get an idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the year before the Judgment of Paris,
Exactly.
and it was
I
still
got here-
going crazy. I mean,
It was already, in fact, when I got here, there were 30 wineries in June of 1975, 12 of which had been founded 3 years prior.
Wow.
So Napa Valley was very poor. The first half of the 20th century was very difficult for wine anywhere. In the U.S., it was even worse because of Prohibition, but there were still 2 world wars and a depression. And so the business had pretty much fallen into shreds until the mid-'60s, and then it just was already booming when I got here.
But that was still of the era, as one of our past guests told us, where if you wanted people to come to your winery, or maybe this was even before that, there was no place to stay and there was no place to eat because they wanted you to come and buy wine and then go back.
When I got to the Napa Valley, there was 1.5 good restaurants in the Napa Valley. Soon thereafter, Chandon opened their restaurant, which was fabulous, and the rest is history. It's a real center now.
Yeah.
What was the half? What was the half? Good
Oh,
restaurant?
it was half good,
breakfast only.
half of the time it was good. I won't name names. But most of them are long gone. Yeah.
Was there still mixed agriculture in the mid-70s?
More, way more than there is now.
Yeah,
There were prune trees everywhere. There was a prune dryer in St. Helena that was. It may have not been active anymore, but it was still there. Yeah. In fact, the family that owned the house at the winery, the father, it was built in 1899, and the father was standing upstairs in 1906 and saw all the prune trees on the property go like this.
Wow.
And then like this. It was the 1906 earthquake, and he
Oh,
jumped out the
wow.
top window.
He jumped out the top window. Great.
Better than having a house fall on you, I guess.
Yeah.
So a
that's
lot
true.
of big changes.
Yeah.
And Cathy, what was it that got you off the trampoline and into wine?
I just fell in love with wine. I was studying biology. I love learning about living systems. I still learn something new every day to this day. And so it was a combination of falling in love with it for all the usual reasons. It's delicious. You share it with friends and family. It makes food taste better. But for me, it was the fact that it's a whole series of living systems that conspire to what's alchemy, really. We don't understand it that well in the glass. So I'm still studying biology.
Yeah. And are you passing everything down to Grace? Are you taking over?
Well, I'm assistant winemaker
Yeah.
as of this past year. I've been full-time in the business for the past 5 years now. I came back in COVID, as I think many kids did. And then I kind of spent the first few years working in all different aspects of the business. So spent a year in the tasting room. I did a lot of stuff in the vineyard, kind of accounting, you name it. I did it in the winery. And then in the past, let's say 2 years, I've really been more involved in the production side. But yeah. And then my sister.
And she did quite a bit of studying too.
Yeah, I got my winemaking certificate from UC Davis 2 years ago. And then I also have done a little bit through the WSET program. I went up to level 3 of that.
Nice. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah. It was fun.
Yeah.
Because I had actually been thinking about that program when I used to live in New York. So I got a degree in acting, and then I kind of went away as far as I could, I guess, from Napa. But I ended up working at Union Square Cafe in New York City and fell in love with hospitality.
Is that a Bobby Stuckey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Danny Myers.
Danny
That's
Myers.
like, that's like the
Yeah.
original Danny Myers,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
no tips, the whole thing.
Yeah. But when I was out there, I got more interested and involved in wine from kind of a slightly different perspective. So I got really interested in the world of wine and how Napa fit into all of that. Because I think growing up here, I never fully appreciated it. I never fully understood how we fit into the world of wine, even historically. So that's how I kind of came back into it. And so the WSET program was something that I'd been thinking about over there as well.
Because someone looking from the outside would think you're being raised in Napa by your mom, that you guys are just like, you're hanging out with winemakers every day. Was it just like you just kind of took it for granted that
100%.
was normal life?
Yeah. I did my homework at the winery. I worked harvest, bottling, anytime something was on the weekends.
Lots of cleanup.
Lots of cleanup. Although I will say, I think I was more there for the flashy stuff. When I came back in the pandemic, I was like, wow, I don't remember the 2-hour cleanup at the end of a harvest day. The cranky kids got to, go have a snack. Yeah. But I really did work in the winery, and I was fully involved and immersed in it growing up. But there wasn't much of a precedent that I saw growing up here in terms of second generation or next generation being involved in the wine industry. It was kind of viewed as something our parents did. And I went to school with a lot of winery kids, but never did I see one that was getting more involved. Now, of course, there are a number that are kind of coming back. And
well, at some point, wine became cool.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
Like wine was never cool. When I started, which was not nearly as long as you, but it wasn't cool. It was a bunch of white, fat old guys.
Yep.
Totally changed. Completely different now, obviously.
I noticed.
I mean, it wasn't. And there were, there were some women that I worked with. The first winery I worked at, there were no women in production at all. And it wasn't even like talked about. The second place there was, and she was a force to be reckoned with. She, fought for her opinion and whatnot. But at some point, wine did become cool. Younger people were more interested in it. Would you agree with that?
I think just in our culture in general, wine became much more. When I first got involved in wine, Americans didn't care what they ate and drank. It's all happened in our lifetimes. Yeah. The interest in good food and good wine worldwide.
And we had a bit more of a European setup at home. Personally, there was always wine on the table growing up. We did the kind of thing in the beginning where it would be 4 fingers of water to 1 finger of wine
for the kids.
For the kids,
it's an old Italian.
And the ratio changes the older you get, right?
Well, yeah, it was actually my sister Rose. She's 3 years older, and she one day, this might have been middle school, she said, "Hey, can I just have it without the water?" And my parents were so proud. Like, finally, these children.
The 1 finger of wine.
Yeah. It's still just but pure wine. Yeah.
And Cathy, will you just talk a little bit about your husband? Because I think aesthetically, your brand has a lot of his imprint on it.
Hugely. And in fact, he's completely responsible for that beautiful campus on the highway. He designed the winery and made it happen. The old farmhouse was in very bad shape. We were told it was condemned when we bought the property. And he's renovated that and made it beautiful. And even the palm trees, everything you see there, he's responsible for. Yeah. And then
what was his background?
His background, interestingly enough, and I think appropriate for the wine business or winemaking, is he had 2 degrees from Middlebury College, one in physics, the other in art.
Physics and biology. It's a pretty good
winemaking kind of
combination, right?
Dynamic family.
We've got everything we need. But anyway, he's involved at every level, and he's been very involved in locating and negotiating the properties that we've been very fortunate to acquire over a long, long time.
Yeah, and you're, I think, 2 of your vineyards, was it just recently last year, were certified organic?
Yes, and that's thank you, Grace. I've farmed Kronos Vineyard.
Big ding episode.
Yeah.
I've farmed Kronos Vineyard from the first minute. We closed escrow the last day in 95. Farmed it organically for 28 years. But never had the bandwidth to certify. And I'm not sure it was as important to my generation, frankly, until Grace 2 years ago got us certified. We're not doing anything different, but we're certified.
We're keeping better records.
We're keeping better records. I've never been very good at that.
Yeah.
But we're CCOF certified now.
Yeah.
And simultaneously got their Napa Green Vineyard and Napa Green Winery certification.
Yes.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Grace.
Yeah. Why was that important to you?
You know, I think that it's something generational that I think that younger generations care a lot more about checks and balances. And I think that in a world that we are so overstimulated by the stories people tell on social media and on the internet, I think that anybody can say whatever they want. And to have a third party who then will do those checks and balances. And also you at the end of the day, you have to put your money where your mouth is. If it's something that is that important to you, I think that people care a lot more. And I think that you're also then showing what your brand stands for in terms of the ethos. And so that's kind of what changed it for me. But I do think it's generational.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's bandwidth too. She's been able to help us get things like that done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were probably proud of what your mom was doing,
Very.
but you didn't have anything to show people like, hey, we're actually doing all these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Cathy, what was that like when you started farming that way? Like, did people ask you why there were weeds growing in your vineyard?
Well, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. When I first got here, a well-farmed vineyard was clean.
Yeah.
That's everybody would talk about how well farmed it was if the floor was just spotless.
Right.
My
Dead.
first big interaction with organic farming was with Ted Hall. I made his wine at Long Meadow Ranch for 10 years, and he was a really early adopter of certified organics. And so by the time we had our property, I knew, especially in our climate, there's no excuse not to be farming organically. So it wasn't even a second thought when it was 1995 that we closed on the Kronos property, and it's been organic every second.
Ted Hall was also, and maybe I have the timeline wrong, but it was important. They raised cattle and had tree crops and from the start, right? And
from the very start, organic vegetables, honey, bees. Now they have lamb as well as the Scottish Highland cows. They're still doing all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were drinking some of your 99 Cab the other night.
Oh,
Nice.
At the Elaine book release party.
Yeah,
right?
Elaine Chuck and Brown, a friend
I'm sorry
of the
to miss
pod, sort of did a release party at Valley down the street, and so there was some legends in the house. You were missed, but we were thinking about you because we were drinking that amazing Cab.
Oh, thank you. I love the 99. It was really long and cool.
Yeah. And it was fun to read about, some of the portions of the book. Something that I didn't realize is that, during those whole Robert Parker years, that because you were making these elegant restrained cabs, you were sort of left out of the conversation.
Almost worse than left out. It was my wine became very unfashionable. Really styles of wine just are fashion. They come and go. Yeah. But for me, this wine was fully formed. The Napa Valley was fully formed in my head before I started doing it. I made wine for other people in the hills, Chappellet and Long Meadow Ranch and York Creek for decades. But this wine inside my head had to come from down in the benchland for the way it's built. The tannins are velvety. There's lots of good natural acidity. They're aromatic. Yeah. They're built differently than mountain Cabernets.
Yeah.
And so also for the first years, you only made Cabernet.
And I essentially still basically make only Cabernet. The letterhead says Corison Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. Right. I goof around with a few other things. I make Riesling and Gewurz on a home winemaking scale. I mean, it's tiny, 50 to 100 cases.
Right. This is the Gewurz is Sonoma Valley. Right?
Well,
Isn't
it was Anderson Valley for a long, long time.
Oh, okay.
And then later it was Moon Mountain.
Okay, right.
And I lost that this year, and it turns out I can, much to my surprise, I'm back in Anderson Valley for the next harvest at the same vineyard. Okay. Alsatian inspired, just totally dry, just for fun, just goofing around. Yeah. And then Sunbasket has a few short rows of Cabernet Franc.
Okay.
And so we do a single vineyard bottled Cabernet Franc. It's 4 barrels a year. Yeah.
And Grace, what's on your radar as far as playing around with the other varietals?
I think that we have stayed this small for so long and kept so focused because that has been what we can do and continue to do ourselves. If we were to get much bigger and experiment with a lot more things, I think we'd have to hire out more. And for us, that's not worth it. We want to be the ones that can do everything ourselves. She hasn't missed a single harvest pick day in her entire career at Corison. That is so unusual for a winemaker to be there for every single thing.
Every pick.
So I think that, of course, there are things that would be fun to play around with. But for now, I think, especially talking about sustainability and generational topics, I think it's really important to establish something. And she built this label saying that, a label has to stand for something. And ours stands for Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah.
Of a particular style. Yeah.
Right.
Can we talk about the style conversation a little bit more, and sort of how you found that with the Valley Floor fruit, and what you saw it to mean, and in comparison with the mountain fruit, and just sort of like in the beginnings of your career, what wines were drawing you to what the Valley Floor should be as opposed to the mountain cab, and kind of that stylistic pendulum swing that you've managed to avoid.
We can't use the term Rutherford Bench anymore, but it means a lot, because when sub-AVAs came in, everybody wanted to be in the Rutherford Bench AVA, even all the way down to the river and heavy clay soils. It made no sense. So they bickered over until finally the federal government, who actually made the AVAs, set the lines according to municipal boundaries. So it does mean something north to south, but it doesn't mean as much as it could because it's not drawn by winemakers, wine growers. But the most famous Cabernets historically all came from the Rutherford Bench, mostly. I mean, with the exception of maybe the Chappellet Cabernets. Those are great vineyards. They're some of the best Cabernet vineyards. But grapes grown in the hills are just built differently than grapes grown down on what we call the bench, is just our jargon for alluvial fans. And they're loamy, so they hold water when the vines need it. And then we have rainless summers, which is very rare in the world. And so the vines just stop growing right around veraison without us having to hack them back. And so it's a magical place to grow Cabernet Sauvignon, Napa Valley and Benchland especially. And there's the combination of those soils, and then the fact that we're an extension of the San Francisco Bay, came all the way up to Yountville geologically. And so every night in the summer and way into the fall, we get the fog coming in. So we have this huge diurnal shift. The vineyards in the hills benefit from that. It's like air conditioning. It cools down at night. But then the second the sun comes up, the sun is on their vineyards. We burn off the fog at between 9 and 10 every day. So we have these really hot days. Cabernet needs a lot of heat to get ripe. But we have these really cold nights, sometimes as low as into the 40s. So it's a huge diurnal shift. And I think that's really important to the Cabernet grown on the Rutherford Bench, because we have the great natural acidity from the cold nights. And then there's also something about the tannins in the hills. They don't have as much dirt up there either, really rocky soils, and the tannins tend to be pretty aggressive and pushy. Down, grown right, the canopy managed well, we can get Cabernet ripe on the Rutherford Bench with the tannins that just feel like velvet from the very beginning. And it's all of those things I love. I love the velvety tannins, the snappy natural acidity, the ability to pick fully ripe grapes at lower sugars so my wines are moderate in alcohol. This wine was fully formed in my head, just based on the wines of the world that I love. And I just had to go to the Rutherford Bench to get the grapes.
Right. Cool.
And how is climate change affecting where you guys are at? In my mind, you probably don't get that afternoon burning sun because you become in the shadow of the mountain fairly early.
We're not close enough to the mountain
You're not.
to get
Okay.
the afternoon shade. And in fact, the afternoon sun is very, very strong. And we have to be very careful with our canopy management to be sure that we get the right amount of air and light into the grapes, but not so much that it's a problem.
Have you experimented with shade cloth?
No, I have not. We spend a lot of time out there managing the canopy to within an inch of its life. And that's really, really, we're growing way better grapes than we were even 10 years ago because we've just gotten better at that. So I've never bought into the strict vertical trellising. That most of that happened after phylloxera came back. Everybody went to France and came back with a beret on their head and did exactly what they saw in Bordeaux. We can't strictly vertically trellis, and people don't really do that anymore. They let them get a little floppy, but I never went that direction. Kronos Vineyard is 54 years old now, and it was originally planted Goblet, and very floppy. You know, Californians would call it California sprawl. The Aussies would call it bush vines. Right. And so we're basically fiddling with the canopy in a way that the grapes are protected, but they also get what they need in the way of air and light.
So, did you slowly train the Goblet vines onto a trellis? Is this
Well,
sort of like some modified?
By the
I wanna go
time
check
we
that
owned
out.
it, someone had tried to make it grow in a row and had built a trellis that did absolutely nothing. So it was very California sprawly. And then when it turned 50, 4 years ago, instead of knocking it down, we gave it a new trellis. And so now it does have a bit of a cross arm. And so I'm hoping we can spread the canopy a little bit and just make the canopy management work better.
Yeah, it's got to be challenging with that combination of training.
And who takes care of your grapes? Is it?
Well, funny you should ask. For the last 7 years, we do all our own work. Pruning, all the way through canopy management. We don't have enough people to pick. But working with semenite, pruning, and peopling up a little bit, now we do all our own vineyard. And so now that's another full-time job for me, added in on top, is managing all those vineyards.
And our crew is completely hybrid as well. So everyone who works in the cellar are the same people who prune. So it's really cool because people get a really holistic sense of what exactly they're doing out in the vineyard and how that affects the wine.
I was
itself.
wondering what is the size of the cellar staff?
So we have 4 full-time year-round, and then we have an additional 5 to 6 that start with us at pruning, and they're with us till the end of harvest. And fortunately for us, they're the same people who come back year after year. So the training is a lot easier.
So it's a very European model. You know, there's really, when I was at Davis 47 years ago, there were an enology department and a viticulture department, separate departments in separate buildings. And that follows through to this very day. There's still a little bit of the them versus us thing, which is really too bad. There's only a fermentation in between one and the other. Yeah.
That's like restaurants. You know, you have the back of the house and the front of the house. And, you know, the cooks are getting dirty and sweating and putting out the food. And then the servers are the prima donnas out there that are strutting around like peacocks.
You know, it's funny.
Making the cash tips.
A local restaurateur once told me that he likes to see some tension between the front of the house and the back of the house. Like he likes that the chefs are upset that the servers aren't getting the food out fast enough, and that and vice versa.
Well,
Now I want to know. Now I'm like thinking what restaurant that could be in town.
I'll tell you later.
I have some guesses.
well, that takes the pressure off of the management because basically they're self-regulating. They're yelling at each other instead of someone having to yell at them.
He's probably not listening, so that's perfect.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So what are you guys doing for Rise? What are you going to be talking about?
Well, so we're going to have a conversation like this. So far, thank you. We haven't given away the whole conversation that we'll be having. But I think wanted to bring in Cathy and Grace for a few reasons. I mean, we just love them. They're lovely people. And as we've established, Cathy has seen so much. And I think as we're talking about attracting, Gen Z and millennials to the wine industry, I feel like we're hearing less of a conversation about succession and about how those generations are starting to step into leadership roles. And what does that look like? And how is that going to change the industry? So I think we want to have a conversation about what you've seen in terms of climate change and how we build resilience and regeneration moving forward, but also talk about some of these social dynamics and shifts that are happening in the industry.
Yeah. That was totally surprising to me when Grace said that she, it wasn't like a thing of people taking over for their parents. I mean, here, we have Sam and Phil and then Morgan Peterson and Joel Peterson and then Katie and Jeff Bunshu, kind of taking over for Jim. So it's just kind of like a known thing here.
Yeah. But I do think it's a little cultural, though. Also, because nowhere else in the world can you go and not see next gen fully involved. And the expectation is almost set from the very beginning. Whereas here, I think, you're asked your entire childhood, who do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? Yeah. What are your personal goals?
Right.
And I think that a lot of kids decide to try something else. I went as far away from Napa as I could. I went to Syracuse, New York.
Yeah.
It was very cold. And tried something else entirely, and then eventually came back. But again, I didn't really see people getting involved.
We share that in common. I went to Williams in Massachusetts and did not intend to come back to Napa either. And the winters were very cold. Yeah, I think we can't forget too that just in farming in general, there's a huge challenge now of getting younger people to adopt farming. And this is the sexiest form of farming, but still hard to get younger people to want to.
Well, and family businesses are tough, right? Because maybe at some point part of the family wants out of the business and that throws something into it. Or I worked for a winery that was a family-owned business, but it was never intended to be passed on to their children. It was a business, and when it was done, it was done. That was at Kenwood. And when they sold to Corbel, we asked, like, why would you sell this to the employees and they said that there was never intention to keep it going past themselves. And that's how it ended up where it is.
That makes no sense to me because wine's been made for millennia and it's so much, and in Europe, it's just so much part of the culture and family succession is so important. The continuity.
Yeah.
Cathy, what was that like when she went away to school and you thought she was going to maybe do something else?
Funny that you asked. Somehow I knew that if either of them knew how much I would love to have them come back, they definitely wouldn't. And so they needed to run away screaming, and they both did, and both wound up in New York. And so I just bit my tongue, basically, and it wasn't until the summer of 2019, that my husband got up the guts to ask each of them. They came through on vacations that summer, asked them if they might be interested in coming back to the winery because we would make different decisions starting now. If we knew they weren't coming back, I would be making very different decisions. And we were delighted and surprised to hear them both say that they thought they would circle back in the next 10 years or so. And so we've gone forward. Then COVID happened, and I think that accelerated it a little bit.
Yeah, because I think when you look at succession all around the world, the longest runway you can have, the better for everybody.
For the winery.
Didn't the Benzigers make their kids go away for a little while? I think they would
That's
tell
pretty
them.
common.
They would say, "We want you to go do something else
for
and
X amount of years.
If you do find your way back home, then we know you're committed."
Yeah, they had to go work for another business for at least 1 year. But their problem was they had some kids that came back, some kids that didn't want anything to do with it. But there was never an heir apparent. Like there was no one that said, I'm going to be a winemaker except for Jill. But at that point it was, kind of beyond. There was no one to say, I want to run the company. you know, and they were a very dynamic family because there were so many partners, which makes it even more complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to...
It's a very difficult business, too. Nobody knows from the outside how tough this business is. And I wouldn't want my kids in the business unless they wanted to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you notice changes in diversity? I mean, do you notice a drastic change in more women, more minorities working in the industry now? Or?
I wouldn't call it drastic. I would call it glacial.
Yeah.
But yes, a huge change from when I got here 50 years ago.
Yeah. We see it. I mean, we see it, but I never know if it's just the people that we're hanging around. I don't read Wine Enthusiast or Wine Advocate or those sorts of publications, but it seems to us like a lot of young people are getting into wine, and it seems like from completely different backgrounds. And I think the crush pad facility sort of facilitated that in some ways. You know, the days of the castle with the production facility on the property.
It's called the olive tree line driveway.
The olive tree line driveway. Yeah. When you had the ability to actually just rent space or go and have someone, you know, and you could do 200, 400 cases of wine or something that was actually sort of attainable.
In fact, we didn't have a winery until something like 11 years in. I bought grapes and used other people's facilities for a very long time. 87 was my first vintage. We built the winery in 99.
So where were you making the wines?
All over the place. My first vintage, the first couple of vintages were at Chappellet. I was still the winemaker there. Yeah. And then I went to, I'm not going to remember, on the Silverado Trail. Joe Cafaro was the winemaker. And then up to Rombauer, and then down to Etude, and then up to Longmeadow Ranch. Wow. And then finally we built the winery.
Because you were the winemaker at Chappellet.
That's right.
And then I heard you once say that you never considered yourself a consultant. But
no.
but you've worked with a number of other wineries since then, right?
By the time I left Chappellet, I was 2 years into my own project. It was easy enough to make the wines, but then it had to become a business, and I had to sell the wines, and I really couldn't run a 30,000 case winery anymore. So I left Chappellet, but I also didn't have any money, so I moonlighted. I always had one or two projects on the side. I made Staglin Family's first couple of commercial vintages. I made Ted Hall's first 10 vintages. I made Fritz Maytag's at York Creek.
Oh, did you really? At York Creek?
For 10 years. All the while I was keeping Corison in the air and raising two daughters.
Wow.
Yeah.
The girls weren't born during harvest, were they?
Well, no, actually, they weren't, but close enough. Rose was born in January. Right. Rose was born in January and planned. Grace was born in June, and that year I had grapes in August.
Perfect.
You can fill in the blanks. So yeah, that was a challenge.
Did you ever in a sling while out in the vineyard?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I love it. I want to see a picture of that.
And are you guys still doing about the same? Is it around 30,000 cases?
Yeah. No,
No, 30,000 was at Chappellet.
Oh.
3,000 cases.
I was going to say, that seems like a long...
That's a big difference.
You're personally out in the vineyard,
It's
like, wow.
Order of magnitude, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Sometimes it's less than 3,000, sometimes it's more, but it pretty much, it hasn't changed very much. Again, because I grow the grapes and make the wine and run the winery and raise two daughters, and I just couldn't wrap me around more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wine club is definitely, I'm sure, been built up over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the wine club's become a really, really important part of the business.
Yeah.
In 70% of our sales on average are direct to consumer, and then we save 30% for wholesale, because wholesale has also been historically really important for us.
To get it on restaurant wine lists, we can't do that ourselves all over the world. So the only reason we're in distribution really is for restaurant placements.
Yeah. And then are the wine club members the ones that are getting the Gewürz and the Riesling?
And the Cab Franc.
and the people who visit the winery.
and the Kronos.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do we get our hands on some of that Gewürztraminer?
Whenever we have it, it's available at the winery as well for those who visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, do you have any thoughts or ideas about the younger generation, since you're the youngest one at the table? And, everything that everybody's talking about and a lot of those people writing this stuff are too old to be talking about it.
I mean, I do think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but depending on who you talk to, it's not always a difference in the generation itself. It's also looking at how old they are and were at the time that you're talking about that generation.
That's a great way to put it.
But I also think, too, that I have been finding more peers, they're still spending money on wine, but they might be spending more on a bottle of wine as opposed to cases. Yeah. So they have less brand loyalty, where they just want to sign up for a club that's going to send them wine twice a year. And I also think that they are choosing to spend their money more carefully. And what I mean by that is I know so many more people my age and above who they'll do research before they buy, and they want to know, how do you treat your employees? What are you doing to give back? How are you treating the land? They want to know all of these things, and that will then make them a supporter or not. Yeah. And I think that there's so much consolidation happening in the wine industry at large right now. It's not just here; it's everywhere. Yeah. And I think that the smaller places have the potential to stay a little bit more true to their brand and ethics. And I think that younger drinkers are looking at all of that. Of course, there have never been so many choices either, in terms of not only wine, but spirits, beer, non-alcoholic. So it'll be interesting to see. But I don't think there are a lot of people who are painting it in a very negative light, that are saying that younger consumers just aren't drinking wine. And I don't think that's true. I think they're just drinking differently.
Yeah.
I think they're also looking for experiences. And when they come and have an experience that's really genuine and authentic and connected with the land, that really speaks to those people that are coming out. I just thought of a question I wanted to ask you, which is that coming out of our last rise, we raised some funds for some matching grants to do great practices, regenerative farming practices at some of our member wineries. And one of those grants went to you.
Yes,
to do some sheep grazing.
We had so much fun.
And I know now you've continued that process. And can you talk about what you've seen? I'm still definitely talking to consumers that don't understand what, obviously our industry does, but don't understand what sheep are doing out there. Can you talk about your experience?
I think part of the problem with it too is that unfortunately sheep have become that kind of green check on social media.
It looks good.
It looks good. And there's so many places
grazing along those Roundup strip sprays. Just like
Don't want to see that.
And there are so many wineries in our area that they're using it for different reasons.
Yes. Don't want it to just be a photo op.
Yes, exactly. But now this is our second year using them. 2 different kind of strategies, both years, 2 different companies. But so far, I think one of the big takeaways has been working with smaller farmers in Napa, because their network is also, there's so much more that we can learn from them. And I think that this year we actually learned a lot from the company we worked with. The soils are just so happy and alive. We just did some soil analysis and lots of organic matter. And
we could get the sheep in when it was still wet. It rained a lot this year. And we always try to get the weeds and the cover crop down before bud break for frost protection. And there we have one low spot in Sunbasket that always takes longer to get in with the tractor, and we could get the sheep right in there to mow the cover crop.
Yeah.
It's pretty slick.
Yeah, definitely proper management is important.
Yes.
To really get the full benefit there.
And with all that soil moisture, and you get the sheep in early, you get really good regrowth and, deeper roots and the sheep. Well, you just, for those, we talked about the little white wine fun things that nobody else in the world gets to see. Will you kind of lay out what the vineyard, roster and what wines, everybody, thinks of the Kronos as sort of the flagship, but I don't think people quite know the extent of all the things that you're making.
Okay, I established the label 38 years ago, all with purchased fruit. Again,
Right.
No money, no place. But I bought grapes in barrels instead of cars and houses as a young adult. And
That's a great line.
and so could you read
Just like so there's the sunbasket, or maybe just describe the
okay.
vineyards a little bit and what
So
the lineup of wine is beyond.
We were established with, I made wine here for quite a while in the valley, so I knew people that were growing benchland Cabernet that I really admired. And so I bought the best grapes money could buy, and I bought the best barrels that money could buy, and used other people's facilities for years and years. And so it was all purchased until from 87 to 95, it was all purchased grapes. And then in 96, we started to have Kronos Vineyard, which was already an old vineyard. It's now 54 years old. Very special vineyard. So we only have 2 estate vineyards. There's Kronos. It surrounds the winery on all 4 sides. And then Sunbasket Vineyard is on Inglewood. It's very nearby. Okay. I can be there in 3 minutes on my bike. And I had sourced... And that's how we get around.
Yeah, our whole vineyard crew has bikes.
The whole crew has bikes.
So cool. That's awesome.
So that's a vineyard that I had sourced, had bought the grapes from the very beginning. So for over 30 years, through 3 different owners, and then had the amazing good fortune to purchase it in 2015. And so those are our only 2 estate vineyards. We do a lot of farming now. It's sort of, instead of acreage contracts, we will lease a whole block and we'll do the farming and then take the grapes. We do that from one neighbor. And that works really well. And it's all in our little neighborhood, so they're contiguous with us. And so it's easy for us to get our people and tractors over there. And
stylistically they fit.
Exactly. It's bale, gravelly loam. It's, and that's important from the very beginning. That's been important. My job is really as an interpreter more than anything to let that dirt speak, land speak. Right. Yeah.
And the Napa Valley Cabernet is probably at least 2/3 of our production. So that would be our flagship wine. Okay.
And
the production on the Kronos and the Sunbasket single vineyards is much smaller. It's closer to 200 cases in a small year to maybe 400 or 500 in a big year.
Yeah. And we still purchase fruit.
Okay.
Yeah. All from benchland between Rutherford and St. Helena, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Specific area. Yeah.
Well, people are probably they probably like when you're asking for fruit, I would think.
It's gotten to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It only took a quarter century for the
Well done.
I'm quite serious.
25 years to be an
business
overnight
to be a
success.
going concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the tasting room set up like for people that want to come visit you?
So it's pretty rustic.
It's the barrel
It's a
room.
barn.
Yeah.
So we, depending on the time of year, we usually try to host out in the back of the winery, which is our crush pad, and it's also where we bottle. So during multiple times of the year, that has to move. But it's just right out looking at old Kronos Vineyard.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're hosting inside. Sometimes we're hosting upstairs, weather dependent.
Yeah.
And it's usually we usually have 1 to 2 flights at a given time. It's Cabernet.
Yeah.
And by appointment?
It is by appointment, but you can always call as well. We don't have very many hosts, and we only host 1 group per host as well. So we can't see that many people, but yeah, we're always open for people who call and stop by last minute too.
Do you have any friends of yours that you went to school with that are doing the same thing you are as far as taking over for their parents?
Everyone in a similar situation to mine I've met since moving back.
Yeah.
I don't know really anybody that I grew up with that has circled back. That's not to say that they won't with time, but I think my mom kind of mentioned our timeline was a bit more accelerated given the pandemic. I think if you had asked me back in 2020 how long I thought I would be out in New York for, I think I would have said at least 3-4 years.
Yeah.
But that being said, having moved here now, there are a lot of people in similar situations. And I think many of them are in the smaller businesses, I would say, across the board.
Yeah.
That's one thing I found surprising when I came back, was how many people, whether they were in wine families or not, had come back to Sonoma and Napa and were working in wineries and working in wine in some way.
Yeah, it's a pretty beautiful spot.
But it was nothing. I don't like in high school. Nobody talked about that growing up here. That like their dream was to come back and run a sales department at a winery or something. That, like nobody. There wasn't a thing that we were. I mean, I know I'm a little bit older than you, maybe more than a little bit, but it wasn't something that was. Like, the halls of Justin Sienna, even with all the fancy names that were in that hallway, nobody was talking about like taking over their parents' business.
Lots of famous wine kids. Yeah.
I grew up in Petaluma, and a lot of people went to Cal Poly, but very few of them came back to run the family dairy.
When they came back, the dairy was gone.
Yeah. Did I miss? Is it Rose?
Yes.
Has Rose come back?
So Rose works part-time for the winery right now.
Okay.
She's on and off lived at the property. She's currently down in San Diego as a full-time math tutor, which she absolutely loves. And she's up at the winery for every bottling and harvest as well. And then, for the occasional moonlighting when we need some extra help for certain things. But she does intend to be involved full-time
in
at
the
some
accounting
point.
department, maybe?
Yeah.
She's been very helpful. She
Good to have
helped
a
us try
mathematician in the
to
family.
close year end a little more timely this year.
Engineering degree from Harvey Mudd.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
You're both overachievers.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah. So she is very involved as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you want to maybe say a little bit about Rise and get people excited about it and tell them where they can, get some
Learn
passes.
more.
Learn more, buy tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is our third Rise Climate and Wine Symposium. I'm really excited about this year's content. This conversation has just got me more excited about our marquee keynote conversation on May 7th.
Hopefully we didn't steal too much thunder.
No, you didn't.
Okay, good.
I was like, I could jump in with questions, but then I'm going to be taking away from Rise, so I won't do that. But I'm really, it's a hugely impressive lineup. It's 62 speakers. Almost half of them are women speaking to demographics. So that's really exciting. But you go to risegreen.org and you'll see all the lineup for each day. It's a series of 6 half-day events organized around our 6 pillars of sustainable wine growing. So each day really diving into a particular topic, but they're all interconnected. Cathy and Grace will be talking on the supply chain day, but we're not going to be talking all about supply chain so much, or supply chain in a broader sense. Elaine is speaking on the last day, so someone else we spoke about today on May 8th. But go there and see all the content. It's going to be fun, and certainly this conversation on May 7th is going to be very fun.
And are all of them held in the same place?
They are. So it's at the Charles Krug Carriage House, which is a beautiful old building there behind the winery. It's a great space.
And if you get a pass, should people eat before they come? Should they go and then go get something to eat at one of those great restaurants you have over there, or is
1.5 great
It includes food. It includes breakfast and lunch and wine. Actually, it's like a lot of budget is actually going towards food. But Rise is all about community and really building chances to connect. And we felt like having food and good food. This is good catered food, is a really important part of building that connection and ending out the day, because it's just a half day. We want to end with everyone really talking about what they've taken away and how they're going to go and act upon it, because we're all about action and impact coming out of Rise, and just even talking about the grazing that's been able to start at Corison because of Rise. We've tracked dozens of impacts like that. So we're really there to facilitate change. And believe me, it's worth it. I hope everyone thinks it's worth it to spend a few half days at Rise.
Yeah, I think Nellie here at Enterprise Vineyards and
She's
Murray
gonna
are
come.
excited.
Yeah, and you can get a 6-pack and you can split it up among a couple people if you want to. You can get individual day tickets, so you don't have to come to every day. You should, but you don't have to. And I will say day 4, which is focused on the people, May 6th, we shifted to the afternoon. So there is one day where the timeline's a little bit different, and that day is going to end with a fun happy hour and treats. But yeah, no, there's treats every day.
What does that mean, treats?
Wine treats.
You have to come and find out.
Yeah.
That day is going to be like charcuterie, cheese, olives, that kind of thing.
All right.
You're like, should I come or not? Will the food be good enough?
I don't know. Treats is very vague. I'm just curious.
Use your imagination, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Do you guys do events? Do you do any sort of wine club parties, pickup parties, anything like that?
We do 2 events a year, typically. Yeah. We do one that we actually just had our spring party 2 weeks ago, and it's mostly for wine club, but it's open to anybody, and we're releasing our single vineyards usually around that time, and it's outside and beautiful. At least it was this last year. And then we'll do more of a seated wine club dinner in the fall. In this last year, we actually did a 25th anniversary of Kronos, where we opened every single 25 years out of Magnum, and that was just
How
once
did
in a
that
lifetime.
happen? 25 vintages of Kronos. It feels like
Do you have a favorite? Did you
Oh,
have
yes.
a favorite?
2001.
2001.
Interesting.
And some of that is available in the cellar.
No, it's way sold out.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what was 2000. I was graduating high school, so I wasn't paying attention to the weather. What was 2000? What made 2001 so special?
It was a classic long cool season. Those are always my favorite. But what made it even better than my other favorites, I have never known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian and I debate frequently 97 versus 98 in general in Northern California. What are your thoughts there? Tell me I'm right.
Well, 97 was one of the first really ripe vintages, and one of the first vintages that was rewarded for being really big and ripe and boozy. You'll always know what I'm thinking.
Rewarded.
So yes, 75 was a really good. No, 95. Excuse me, it was a really good vintage, but I prefer the 98s, and we're talking about the
97.
97.
Yeah.
Excuse me, 97 was very ripe. And a beautiful vintage, but they haven't held up that way that well. 98 was very challenging, and it was cold and rainy, and especially at flowering, and so set was uneven, and crop was small, and people weren't dropping green crop because the crop was so small. But we did everywhere, and it was small, but the weather for ripening was beautiful. And we love the 98 at the winery right now, especially with a couple decades on it. It's one of the favorites at the winery.
Yeah.
The 98
right now,
didn't show
especially
well young, right?
Especially in mags. Well, it was a lighter wine, really. You know, it always showed fine, I thought. What's interesting to me is how well it's aged, especially in mags.
And I think those who didn't then go through and do drop would have seen a harsher wine in its youth too.
A lot more green character, a lot more tannin, perhaps.
Does every vintage really stick with you? Do you really remember distinctions of every vintage?
Yes and no. I can tell you a little something about them.
Yeah.
It's the ones that were either just fabulous or really challenging are the ones that stick.
Yeah.
And we also had a refresher when we went through all of the
That makes sense.
last 25.
I bet that was fun.
My dad does it back to like the 70s, and he'll talk about the weather and a rainstorm that happened in 1977.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's also like entirely unverifiable. Right? You can never be like, oh
He
yeah,
could
sure,
just
that's
be
what
making
Dad
it.
would
I
have
believe
said.
it.
You say it with conviction, and it's totally true.
That's so funny.
I have to ask, we're going to let you guys go, but I have to ask about the 22 vintage, which around here, I just remember, rain, we had horrible heat spikes, and I heard a lot of swearing going on around here during that vintage. So I was kind of freaked out about what the wines were going to be like, but they've come out very elegant.
It's interesting. It was until that heat spell, the weather was really good for ripening. And I pick weeks before most. So I was already picking when that hit. I saw the 10-day forecast, and I sat down and I scheduled all the rest of the picking. And we picked, I actually, because in 17 I learned that picking 9 days straight without anybody getting a day off is not a good idea. Me especially, because I am at every pick, and I was at 3 night picks that year, and at the winery all day. So by 22, we did take 1 day off in the middle, but we picked just as fast as we could. I call it a rescue mission, but because we were already had a running start, and then we just got it off. The wines are fine.
Yeah.
They're a little riper perhaps in character, but they're still very much in the Corison wheelhouse.
And have you guys released 22s yet?
No. Next fall.
We'll release the 22 Napa in the fall, and then the single vineyards the following spring.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Oh,
this has been
thank
awesome.
you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. We'll look
questions.
forward to seeing you in Napa when we come over and see you guys.
And at Rise.
Yes.
And at Rise. Yeah.
If somehow there's anybody out in the wine podcast listening world that doesn't know how to get a hold of Corison and all the important details, will you drop the plug?
Yeah, sure. We're on Highway 29, 987 Saline Highway, and our website is just corison.com.
Corison.com.
Yeah.
All right.
1 R.
1 R.
1 R.
All right, you guys, anything you want to
When's this come out?
get out in the world? So
This is coming out on Friday.
there you is it?
I don't know.
I guess it is.
This is how we do all our production planning is at
Perfect.
the end of every episode. Just so you know, this is not
Well,
unusual.
no, because we're trying to still help.
We got Napa Rise.
Trying to
Help
help
spread
Napa
the word.
Rise,
And
spread
Rise
the
starts
word.
next
Okay.
Tuesday, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
All right, so
So-
we're gonna have 2 podcasts out next week. Then.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, the other one is
Comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a momentous occasion, so it deserves its own release.
All right, so in that case, we are doing an art exhibit here at the Tasting House
That's
on
right.
May 2nd. It's a Friday night. It'll be from 5 to 8. It's all Jerry Garcia.
4 to 7.
4 to 7. Show up late or early. I'll be here all day. It doesn't matter. All Jerry Garcia artwork that is going to get hung up in here.
Garcia
pretty soon.
prints. Signed
Very
Garcia
cool.
prints.
All signed
Wow.
Garcia prints and available for sale, which
He was a musician, is that right?
yeah,
Did some stuff. A couple songs you may have heard.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Anything else you want to plug, or you can, and I'll just mention it. You can go on the 16600 website and just go to the events page, and you'll see exact information.
Brian took over the website and he's very proud. That's really what this plug was all about.
Oh, let's see.
When things aren't getting done the way you want them, you just do them yourself.
Yeah, so true.
So you just kind of learn, right?
Love that.
Yeah. No, that one.
Yeah.
Got to figure it out.
What else we got going on?
I huge shout out to my wine club. You know, when you hit their credit cards on tax day, there was very little pushback. So that just makes me feel really, really good about the wines. They must have been very excited.
Are
So
you saying they were so distracted,
Distressed.
or they were so relieved to have some good news?
yeah,
Needed
I
some
think
wine.
so. That was exactly right. So thank you to all my wine club
I
folks.
was talking to a winery that pressed the button on the wine club on the day the tariff stock market crash happened, and they did not have success on that one.
Oh,
God. And did you release the Carignan?
Yep,
To the wine club?
and the rosé of Petite Syrah, and
Okay.
early feedback has been very, very good.
Cool.
So yeah, it's been great. Now it's time to ship it all out.
Yeah. Right.
Make UPS rich.
Yes.
And the winery broke again.
You know, I have learned that when you do that, when you do that, you have to look and go, how much of this is shipping, and how much of this is taxes. Yeah, very important.
Details.
So you got to have
Very
a
false sense of security.
engineering math tutor in the family.
yeah.
Anna, thank you. Appreciate
thank you for having
We look
us.
forward to
Yeah.
seeing you on the other side of the mountain.
Yes. It's coming
Cool.
right up. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, guys. Hit the
Subscribe,
smash that like button. yo.
review,
Sure.
whatever. I think it helps.
Only good reviews though.
Only good reviews.
Good reviews.
And tell your friends, but only the cool ones.
that
right?
last one hurt a little bit.
It sucks when it's personal, you know?
Exactly. It was personal too.
Oh, now I got to go look.
Kathy, thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
It was a treat.
Good to meet you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Grace.